Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bullpen. In the Bullpen today, we got Ben Q, columnist and English editor at Americain. Good day, Ben, welcome.
Good to be back, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man, glad to have you back. All right, let's get right into it. I don't want to presume what you know or believe about vaccination mandates or even mask mandates and protocols. So give us your sentiment as it relates to those items.
Well, okay, I mean, if we start with the vaccine issue, I think that the fundamental problem you've got there is that, well, as well as being what I consider to be a fundamental violation of civil liberties, the issue with the vaccine passports or mandates or whatever is that they're fundamentally separating society between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. And we know that 30%, I don't know the exact figures actually, I should have looked them up, but about 20 to 30, even 40, I'm not sure, percent of the American population has not been vaccinated, and a large percentage of them are absolutely resolute in the fact that they will never get vaccinated. So if you're an unvaccinated person living in, say, New York, and as someone who's interested in issues of racial justice, a large proportion of Black and Hispanic and even low-income communities are those who have not been vaccinated. What you're effectively doing is you're creating a sort of second-class citizen. So you can't go to a restaurant, you can't get on a flight, you can't go into private, you can't go into shops. There's all kinds of things that, in New York that they are now imposing. And I think that basically it's, as I said, it's creating two tiers of citizenship, one for the vaccinated and another for the unvaccinated. And I think that, if we were talking about the Black Death or something absolutely lethal, then this might be a different conversation. But given that there are very real concerns about the vaccine, and whether you believe them or not, I think they're justified. The pace of the rollout, the time in which it was developed, the reported side effects that people are having. I don't think people who don't want to get vaccinated and who take that personal choice, not to get themselves vaccinated and their families, should be basically treated like second-class citizens. That is my ultimate feeling on the issue.
All right, glad to have your feelings. So let me give you some fact here. You are incorrect about Black people and vaccinations. The number one demographic and this is in Business Insider, you can check out my data. The number one demographic who are never vaxxers or say they would never be vaccinated are actually white males, okay? White males are your number one demographic in that arena. Vaccination mandates, you have a problem with them fundamentally based on a civil liberty. Well, let me be very clear. Vaccination mandates have been around, not only the United States of America, but on the planet for many, many decades. For example, in all 50 states in the United States of America, even though there was no federal mandate for vaccinations, in every single state in the US, there is a state mandate for vaccinations. Every single school system has a state mandate. For places like California and Texas, they require a couple of more than places like Texas and Georgia. But every single state, conservative, liberal, Republican, sir, I allowed you, sir, in all due respect, I allowed you to finish all of your commentary before I responded. In every single state, there is already a mandate for vaccinations based on the safety protocol of that particular school system. Also, immigration officials have routinely required proof of vaccinations. Ellis Island, New York, Angel Island, San Francisco, and other places, they have had these vaccination mandates in for a very long time based on what's germane to that local area. Those are your mandates. Your mandates also extend to companies like Delta and Uber and other companies that say in order to continue to operate at certain levels at this agency, you will need to have certain vaccinations. We're talking about pre-COVID, by the way. And if you want to travel abroad, there are vaccination requirements as well. These vaccination requirements have been around for decades also. From diphtheria, tetanus, measles, mumps, rubella, hepatitis B, hepatitis A, tuberculosis. The list goes on and on. The US military has to engage in the same activity. They are required by their mandate to receive certain vaccinations. Some have to receive over 20. depending on their deployment. My overall point to you is this. You all are completely antithetical to the notion of COVID-19 mandates, which by the way, there is no mandate through the federal government for everyday citizens, and there's no mandate for a statewide compliance. But for some reason, I don't hear you all having the same intellectual argument as it relates to the well over 20 vaccination mandates that are already required by actual law.
Okay, so let me just take you up on a few points there. I mean, I think that you're probably broadly right in that, these vaccinations that have been extremely well established, like, you say measles, or I can't remember the other ones, but those are proven vaccines, and I completely, I think they're a different conversation ultimately, because the reason that people are so skeptical about this COVID vaccine is because of the pace of the rollout. And people feel that, those vaccines that you referenced before have taken decades and, decades in the making of absolutely rigorous testing. So that's my first point. My second point would be that how many times can you honestly say in your life that you have been asked to provide proof of vaccination for anything? Now, I'm sure you have got vaccinated, and I'm sure it's happened on occasion, but have you ever been on a flight before, or gone into a restaurant, or tried to buy something, and someone has asked you for a piece of paper to prove that you've been vaccinated? It may have happened, but I don't think it's something that's happened regularly in your life, because that is not society. That is not something that society is accustomed to. I've never been asked in my entire life for proof of vaccination to board a flight or to eat in a restaurant, or whatever it might be. So that would be my contention to you. Those vaccines might be mandated, but there's very little evidence of that in everyday life. And the difference is this COVID vaccine is that they intend to basically impose it everywhere. In fact, that is what they are doing in the state of New York.
Okay, so let me respond to your question directly to me. So the answer is yes, I have provided a passport, a vaccine passport, to not only be a student in a school, but to also be a teacher in that school. We have to have certain vaccinations even filed at colleges, private and public. So this goes from K through 12 education to college life. Literally, virtually, every single American has had to present a vaccination passport at some point. And every single American virtually has had to receive a mandated vaccination. The reason why I brought that to your attention is because you said that your issue with this was based on, and I quote, a violation of civil liberties. Well, if it is a violation of civil liberties, then the argument that the drug or the vaccine is new, that's not an argument, because it's not about the vaccine. It's about the violation of civil liberties. And if that is your premise, Ben, if your premise is this mandate, vaccine mandates are a violation of my civil liberties, then that means that every other mandate for vaccinations should also be a violation of civil liberties as well. My question to you, based on that linear logic, why have you not made contention with these other dynamics of the violation, as you put it, and you only call COVID-19 vaccines a violation? And let me say this for the record. I understand that people will have vaccine hesitancy. All we can hope to do is give them proper and good information, but we're fighting against bad and false information on a regular basis. But my question does stand to you, sir. If this is a violation of civil liberties, what does it matter, the testing phase of the drug that has been approved by the FDA at this point?
So repeat that last thing you just said. What does it matter to the
if you say that this is a matter or a violation of civil liberty, then what does it matter how long the drug has been here, or that it is mandated, or people are mandated to get it for certain jobs? The FDA has approved it. If this is just a violation to have any kind of mandate for vaccines, why are you not bent out of shape about the other vaccinations that are already mandated? If it's a civil issue, a liberty issue?
Well, I mean, I think I've made that quite clear in the fact that I do ultimately believe that this vaccine is different due to the pace of the rollout and the rapid nature.
So it's not a civil issue?
Well, it is a civil issue, but I mean, the difference is that those vaccines that you're referring to in the past are far, far, far better established than the COVID vaccine. You know, people can say whatever they like about FDA approval and whatnot, but the COVID vaccine has no long-term data because that would be absolutely impossible. Well, I mean, because it hasn't been used in the long term. And I'm going to give you an example. I mean, I took the Pfizer vaccine. I took the first dose in June, and it has given me palpitations of the heart. Now, fortunately, it's not particularly serious. But the fact of the matter is that these vaccines do have proven side effects, and people do have a legitimate reason to be fearful of them, or not fearful, but to be hesitant, as you say. Mm-hmm. So I think the fundamental difference between, you know, a measles vaccine and the coronavirus vaccine is I think that people are quite justified to be against, or have some reason to be skeptical of the COVID-19 vaccines, whereas I think that those other vaccines you're referring to are far more established and far more proven, and against disease, which in some cases is even more serious than COVID.
So I want you to understand the argument that you're making. You're not making a civil liberties argument, because if you were making a civil liberties argument, you would have intellectual integrity in the application of your argument, which means your argument would also apply to the current vaccine mandates that are being implemented across the country and beyond. But you don't have an issue with that because of the established nature of these particular vaccinations. So you do not fundamentally believe that vaccine mandates in context are an in fact violation of civil liberty. You simply believe that this particular vaccination warrants more exhaustive study and more data. Correct? That's really the argument you're making, not a civil liberties argument, but a COVID vaccine argument based on the longevity or lack thereof of the background of the drug, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's look at it like this. Civil liberties are, you know, with the question of civil liberties, there always has to be some level of balance between what protects the population and what keeps them free. Okay, so there have to be compromises. And all I'm saying is that on the issue of this particular vaccine, I think to force it on people when it hasn't even been, you know, in rollout for a year, and then forcing them to live as second-class citizens for not taking it is basically a violation of their civil liberties too far. But it's not just that. You know, that is just one of the broad arguments I want to bring to you today about vaccine passports. I mean, one of the issues, and I think this came out in a Harvard poll recently, is that the country is deeply divided on the issue. America, it's like most things, it's 50-50 on, and you know, there are some people who believe it should be on airplanes but not in businesses. Some people don't believe it at all. Some people believe it should be everywhere. So that's another issue. It's a highly contentious issue, and I think, given the situation that America is in, you know, with everything that's gone on, be it with elections, be it the riots last year, be it Afghanistan, this is just going to be another thing that stirs the melting pot of civil society breaking down. The other point I want to make is that, you know, vaccines, you know, vaccine passports, and you know, the reality is that there is a large percentage of the population who are just not going to take it, no matter how hard you push, because they've decided. And you know, in the American economy and the global economy has already taken absolute battering as a result of lockdown measures, which I believe to be in a lot of cases overly draconian. So the economy is already suffering, and private businesses are fighting for their lives to get back to where they were before. And this is only going to further damage, you know, further wreak economic damage on you know, where it is imposed, particularly on things like the tourist industry or the hospitality sector. And this is a time where the economy needs to bounce back. And for anyone who says it's economy versus lives, I'm afraid that is a lie, because the economy has always and will always be intimately linked to the health of people, because when people have money, they can afford better healthcare. So there are a range of issues surrounding vaccine policy.
So let me respond to this. Number one, when you say that people are being forced to live as second-class citizens, let's be very clear. If you take the vaccine or don't take the vaccine, that is your personal healthcare decision, okay? That vaccine is really for you. The mask is for me. The mask is for the protection of others. We'll get into the mask in a minute. But if you decide not to take the vaccine, you don't have any of your rights taken away. Going to a particular country, being able to go to a particular restaurant or hold a certain job, those are not constitutional rights. Those are privileges afforded to you if you meet the qualification, right? A private company has the legal right to tell you no shoes, no shirt, no mask, no service. They can also enforce COVID rights if they choose to. Private companies can do that. COVID vaccine passports are allowable, at least under current statute. Also, as it relates to traveling, we've already established there's a litany of vaccines that you must have typically if you want to travel to certain places. That's already in the mandate. There's nothing new about that. Individuals who would like the privilege of traveling to a particular country and that country has a mandate order. Hell, we got one in America. You come from certain countries, you got to have certain vaccinations. It's already here, brother, is my point. But we've never said, well, that's a violation of your constitutional or civil liberty. That's a violation of your human dignity. No, if you want the privilege of coming here, you gotta have this particular vaccine or vaccine regimen. That has already been truly established. So I find it quite ironic that your argument is that these individuals who may not be able to engage in certain privileges are somehow different than any other person who had to either get the vaccination or have a litany of vaccinations already in order to engage in certain privileges in this country and beyond. What makes it different? Why is it different when you say, okay, we don't want you having to get the COVID vaccine to work in healthcare, but we do want you to have these 18 other vaccines to work in healthcare? What's the difference? Do they have the right to mandate them or not?
I would say that, I think I've explained the difference as well as I can, which is that there are some vaccines which have been, vaccines are wonderful things. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, okay?
Yeah.
Polio vaccines, measles vaccines, they've been around for decades. They were decades in the making. They're proven to work, okay? And they're highly effective, and there's very little known side effects to them. The COVID vaccine is fundamentally different because it only came out last December, having been rushed through, and I understand why it had to be rushed through, but there are issues with it. There is the question of side effect, which I've felt myself because it led to abnormal heart rhythms, which I've had to check out. But even beyond that, forgot what I was going to say now. Even beyond that, civil liberties, vaccines. I've gone completely blank. What was
All right, brother, let me help you out here.
Vaccines.
Okay. So 99%.
I'll come back in a second.
All right, so let me hit on one of your points you made. We only have a couple of minutes, but you talked about the effectiveness of these other vaccines, okay?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the effectiveness of
I remember my
COVID. Now. All right, we'll come back in a second. I want you to remember the number 99%. Let me tell you what 99% applies to. 99% of the individuals who are fully vaccinated, if you got your vaccination, guess what happens? You don't die.
I know the figure you're referring to, which is 99% of people who died in hospital haven't taken the vaccine.
Right, and the other side of that is, if you have it, you're not gonna die from it. If you got the vaccination, you don't die from the variant. You can still catch the variant and still have adverse effects from the variant, but you won't die. You virtually have a 100% chance of living. Now that's called effectiveness. If you're arguing effectiveness of the vaccine, Why do you leave that number out? That's a hell of a number there, brother.
Well, that's the thing that, and you've brought me perfectly onto the point that I just so embarrassingly forgot. The fact of the matter is there are serious questions around vaccine effectiveness. I mean, if you've taken the vaccine, why are you wearing a mask? Why are people being forced to self-isolate? Why are people still getting COVID? I heard the other day that the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who's got two, who had both COVID vaccinations, contracted COVID to quite a serious degree. The vaccines have been proven to be effective, and I'm not totally opposed to them. As I told you, I took the vaccine myself, and unfortunately got an unfortunate side effect from it. But I can even accept that was a rarity, and I was just unlucky. But the fact of the matter is that with the Delta variant and these new variants that are coming up all the time, there are serious questions as to how effective it actually is. Because if people are vaccinated, they should be able to take off the mask and they should be going back to living normally, just as they would be able to if they.
Let me ask you this, brother. Let me ask you, man, before we part. You ever known somebody had the flu shot and still caught the flu?
Probably, yes.
Yeah, that's your answer. When you ask me the question about, if you have the vaccination, but you still can catch COVID or spread COVID, well, that's your answer. We all know someone who had a flu vaccine and still actually caught a flu that season after they received the vaccination. It does happen. Also, the COVID variant is a mutation. It's a mutation of the original COVID-19, which means you still can catch it even with the vaccination. And also the mask. The mask is because science has proven that even with the vaccination and you being asymptomatic and you catch the variant, the COVID variant, you can still spread it to other people without knowing so. So that's your scientific answer. And the mask decreases the spread of COVID by 90%. I hope I answered all of your questions today, brother. I appreciate you being on Indisputable. Thank you, Ben.
Okay, thank you for having me.